Hello world, it is Tuesday, October 13th, a beautiful sunny morning this morning. Looking out my window and there's a locust tree in my neighbor's backyard that's just bright yellow. Looks wonderful with the sun shining on it. It's chilly though, back to normal fall weather I think. Our Indian summer may be over. Kind of appropriate the day after Indigenous People Day, isn't it? The devotion for today, and I forgot to bring it to my other screen, is entitled Don't Congratulate a Cat on Its Landing. And it's written by Lillian Daniel. And Lillian bases the devotion upon Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, and reading from the New International Version. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And Lillian writes, when I was a child, my mother would proudly tell people, Lillian is like a cat. Whichever way you throw her, she always lands on her feet. She meant it as a compliment. We had chaotic lives, moving from one country to another, my father in and out of war zones, and that was just what was visible from the outside. Not all our family's war zones were in another country. What my mother meant was that I could take it. I may have been little, but I was tough, agile, canny, and cunning, like a stray cat that always lands on its feet. Later, as an adult, I began to question the metaphor. What kind of person throws a cat? And furthermore, what kind of person stands by to watch it happen? Picture a poor cat flailing about in the air, thrown against its will, furry limbs thrashing about in the sky, scrambling in the nothingness for a foothold that does not exist. Finally, upon descent, all four paws find their way down through gravity at just the right moment to have the padding scraped off them by the unforgiving concrete below. What kind of person, after watching all that, responds by congratulating the cat on its graceful landing? How about this for an alternative? Stop throwing cats. And if you see one about to get thrown, step in and stop it. And if you hear one crying out for help, don't listen in dispassionately like you're a scientist performing an experiment on resilience, waiting to see how things turn out. Step up and stop the experiment. By the time you are congratulating a cat for landing on its feet, you have missed the chance to do something real. You can't go back and change that. Just be on the lookout for the next cat flailing in the air. And next time, try to help. And the prayer. Grant us the compassion to share one another's burdens in the hard times when we actually need it. Amen. Well, this devotion made me think of all sorts of different things. One of which was a podcast I'm listening to called Color Connection. And it's the three people in the podcast. One's a black woman, one's an Asian man, and one's a white man. And they talk about lots of different things, but kind of revolving around race a little bit. And this morning they were in the midst of talking about some things, and I just lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. The train has left the station, but it'll come back to me in a moment. The other thing I was thinking about in terms of this, I know what it was. It was they were talking about this was a different. Sorry, back that up. It was a second podcast I was listening to. There's a new one I've connected with. It's called Good White Parents, and it's, I think, a 5-part podcast series centered around a woman whose family lived in New York, near New York City, and at the time the city was going to build a new school, and they were going to build it really close to or right next to some housing projects. And several white families petitioned the city and insisted that the school be built closer to their neighborhood so that there could be an integrated school, so that their white students could go to school in an integrated school. Admirable idea. But the reality was that very few white parents sent their kids to that school, including many of whom had written letters to the city about moving the school closer to the white neighborhood to make it an integrated school. And I just started listening to it. I just listened to the introduction, in fact. So I'm interested to see what happened. But in this case, as it turns out, she's interviewing, and I think that's where the podcast is going to be going, talking about the various stories, interviewing some of the people who wrote letters and pushed to have the city move the school closer to their neighborhood, but then never sent their kids there, and exploring why that is. And part of me thinks, well, it was because they had altruistic values and they thought it would be good for white kids and black kids to intermingle and get to know one another. And yet they didn't support it with their actions. So this devotion kind of made me think about that. Somebody should do something about that, but they weren't going to do anything about it. If you're not willing to actually do what you're supporting, then you really need to think about what you're doing. The other thing this made me think about is that sometimes we get so caught up in doing things that help people in crisis, but we don't do so much to prevent the crisis from happening or to try to fix the systemic issues that create the need for that service and puts people in crisis. And that does remind me of that other podcast, Color Connection, because they were talking about that same kind of situation in which we really don't do enough in this world to try to change it so that people can live life, like ensuring that there are just wages, living wages paid to all people. So there's lots of things to think about that this devotion brings up. Don't congratulate the cat. Stop the cat from being thrown. And then maybe even go a step further and find out what's causing people to throw cats and try to change the system so that people don't want to do that. Food for thought. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Hope you have a wonderful day.